sons are Baylor graduates, my daughter is a Baylor student.
Speaker, a fellow Texan from New Boston, Texas, who received his BS from Abilene Christian College in psychology and mathematics, and that says something to me. His doctorate of philosophy and psychology from the University of Texas, and for y'all that don't understand, Texas and Baylor are like Ole Miss and State. He is experienced in teaching, research, and administration, and has held such positions at Pepperdine University in California and at the University of Oklahoma. He and his wife have 2 daughters. Ms. Turner has strong family ties to Mississippi, and I present to you at this time a scholar and a gentleman, the Chancellor of the University of Mississippi, Dr. Jerald Turner.
Thank you very much. I can tell you from leaving Oxford, if you've got anything you got to do outside, you better get with it as soon as I'm finished. It couldn't rain any harder than it was raining at Oxford when I left. But the sky just opened up as I approached Calhoun City. I've already been warned that that standing applause was just the general hospitality that you state graduates would extend to anyone. And not to feel too good about it or anything like that. If Aubrey Lucas were to come up here, you'd even do that for me. But so I've been warned that there are a number of state graduates here. So I'll speak very slowly and distinctly, and you guys can understand the rest of it. Actually, right after I got here, I went over to Starkville and spent a day there with President McComas and his staff touring the campus. And then we had a return visit from all of them, all the vice presidents as well as President McComas a week before last. And tomorrow there'll be a big announcement. McComas and I will meet at the governor's office in the morning at 9 o'clock, and he will sign a proclamation declaring next week Ole Miss State Week. One of the things that we had talked about that I'd seen work in Oklahoma and some other places was having a week of activity preceding the game to get a lot of attention directed toward higher education and the achievements of the 2 institutions. So we will appear together before the Jackson Rotary next Monday. We will tape a TV show together tomorrow afternoon, Bert Case's TV show on channel, I don't know, what, 3 or 5, one of them in Jackson. That'll be a 30-minute show that they will broadcast, and then we will have a luncheon on Friday before the game in Jackson. There are 400 tickets. We have 200 of them, and State has 200 of them. And so you can't be much more amiable than that. As I was telling one of our alumni leaders that I had all this planned out, we want to do this, that, and the other, and he said, "Chancellor, I commend this cooperation, but let's don't get in bed with them." And I said, "Well, I understand your reservation, but now's the chance to make a point." So anyway, after giving you that little jab, I want to tell you that we are going to be doing a lot of things this coming week to try to draw attention to the role that these 2 institutions have, because we really have got to make that point out in the state and even in this region if we're going to be able to do what we need to do, because there is plenty of work for all of us. And the general role of the 2 institutions, I think their roles are quite clear, and we simply need to get about convincing people of what the future really does hold. because what is about to occur, and it's already in gear, but it's going to be reaching here even more and more in the future than it is right now, is that the technological revolution is changing the name of the game, not only in your lives, but in the lives of all of us in higher education. We are really in a pickle trying to keep up with all of the changes that are occurring so that our graduates can go into positions up to speed. Many of you have pieces of equipment in your offices that you would have never thought just a few years ago that you would have in there. And the problem is that the turnover in that equipment is going to be so fast that about the time you get used to it, it's going to be outdated. I was talking to a guy in Jackson the other day who was saying that the main problem that he has in his business is that his product line totally overturns about every 3 to 4 years, and his problem is convincing people they ought to buy now, because what their general view is, well, you'll come out with a whole new generation of these things in a couple of years, and I'll just wait for that. And he says it's true that he will, and just on and on and on it goes. Well, what the challenge that is bringing to universities surrounding all of this centers in being is that all of this change is based upon somebody being able to think through and generate the next level of whatever it is you're dealing with. Now, that means that eventually the basic commodity of the technological revolution is brain power. And boy, that when you start talking about just sheer brain power, then you start scrambling around to say, all right, who can do this and who can do that? The primary commodities of the Industrial Revolution, the Industrial Revolution occurring in the 1700s and 1800s, the two commodities to be successful were cheap labor, and with all the immigrants that we had coming into this country, all of our forefathers made up that labor pool. But the second commodity was abundant natural resources. Calhoun City is based upon one of those natural resources, the timber industry. But there are a lot of others that we had, and having both of those helped us get strong in a hurry, that even by 1812 we could ward off efforts to try to retain us or reclaim us by Britain and by other companies that had to, countries that had to think twice about taking us on. If you throw in our distance across the ocean, you'll have the 3 reasons that we did succeed. And so the basic commodity at that time were in things that we had plenty of, and therefore we could develop this country. The basic commodity now is brain power. Let me give you a great example of how narrow this can be defined. In the April edition of the Chronicle of Higher Education, which is the publication for all colleges and universities, comes out every week, there was an article announcing that the University of Texas, not Baylor, but the University of Texas, Baylor High wasn't quite at this point, but that the University of Texas was announcing the funding of 8 endowed positions in computer science. Now, that was no big deal because it was a part of an announcement of 26 endowed positions in electrical engineering. This 8, though, was a subset of that, and their goal, by these 8 positions, their goal was to attract from anywhere in the world that these people might be, to attract 8 people that could be expected to create the next generation of microchip. Now, you say, well, that's good. That's a great thing to do. The basis of this article was an interview with experts around the world on whether or not there are 8 people alive who could be realistically predicted to create the next generation of microchip. Are there 8 people who really have that capability? Was the basis of the article. They had announced the hiring of the first guy. He was from Denmark, and he had been involved in the creation of something related to computers that IBM and others had been utilizing. But that's how fine it can get. Now, not only are you talking about then people important in terms of their technical and creative abilities, but if you've noticed the commercials on TV now, IBM, Apple, and all the rest of them, you can tell that they have come up to a point that they've sold about as many of those little home computers that they can sell easily. And what they're running up against is the aversion of people to computers. And so now what they are hiring are a lot of psychologists and social scientists that are trying to develop the techniques, instructions, and sales pitch to get people who have sort of an aversion to all of that to use it. It's called, they are people kind, or approachable, or human interactive. And the whole thing is called human factors in computing. And so all of these people that can create those approaches are important. And it just starts spinning out. You can't have good manuals unless you have people who can write well. Texas A&M, I know, went through a great program of trying to find people who could come in and teach their engineers to write well, legible things for non-engineers. So when you start spreading this thing out, you can see that the more technical the world gets, the more important it is to have high-quality technical people, but that's no good unless they can communicate to the average person who's going to utilize that equipment, and that's no good unless you can get that person to overcome his anxiety, fear, aversion to, or whatever, to use that piece of equipment. And it just starts spreading out and out and out. And so the absolute scramble that's going on across the United States today is for the brain power, the top of the line in just about any area you want to look into, because universities and states now are awakening to the fact that the development of the regions in which these universities exist will depend upon the quality of those universities. And Texas is a great example. I left there in '75, and I go back now, and out the northwest part of Austin, Texas, looks like a place I've never been in my life, and I lived there for 5 years. IBM, you just start going down the line of all the high-tech companies that are moving into there. You go out around the University of California at San Diego, the second fastest rising university in terms of academic stature in the country, and it's all happening there. You start looking around in Atlanta, Georgia, around Georgia Tech, and University of Georgia up to Athens, and you start seeing it in there. There is just a scramble on. Those of you that have tried to recruit these kinds of companies know they ask 3 questions. What is the quality of life in your area of the country? And by that they mean, how good are your public schools? How enjoyable is it to live there? How low is the crime rate? Things like that, the quality of life there. The second thing is, what kind of tax incentives and so on can we get by moving into your area? And the third thing is, what is the quality of the universities in your part of the country? And they want 3 things there. They want quality graduates coming out in the areas of their interest. They want the continuing education component of your school that will allow their current employees to constantly keep updated because the change is so rapid for them. And the third thing is, they want the expertise at that university. When they run up to a problem, they can go and get it solved right there. Those are the things that they look for. And so the quality of the universities, the comprehensive universities in a state, are getting important in ways that they never have been. And so you'll see these universities absolutely scrambling to try to maximize the potential that they have. Now, since I know more about that one than any other one, let me go back to Texas and give you an example of this. Their endowment is $2.4 billion from that oil and gas land. $2.4 billion. Harvard's is $2.4 billion. The next one to those two is Princeton at $1.2 billion, half. Texas operating budget this year, the University of Texas at Austin, I'm not talking about the Texas system, is $460 million. Ole Miss, our endowment is $8 million. State's is $12 million. Our state operating budget is $26 million. State's is about $32 million. You can tell that is a huge university compared to ours. But here's the kicker. Last year, Texas raised $107 million from the private sector. The University of California raised about $130 million from the private sector. The University of Minnesota raised 62. In fact, of the top 20 private fundraising schools in the country, 9 of them were public universities. And you could say, well, if you've got all of that money from the endowment and from the state operating budget, why do you need the private resources? Because if you are going to get the icing on the cake and really make the margin of excellence, no matter what your funding is, you've got to have that private support. Where Texas has put that private support is in endowed faculty positions and in endowed scholarships. In 1979, when they announced that they were going to go after the high-tech industries in the state of Texas and they were going to use the University of Texas as the basis of it, they had 112 endowed faculty positions. Now, an endowed chair is $1 million that's in the bank. You draw down the interest off of it, which would be about $100,000 a year. You give that to a senior faculty person, usually about $80,000 of it or $90,000 for salary, and about $10,000 or $15,000 to help in their research and so on. And there is an honor in holding an endowed faculty position. It's a statement of arrival. We don't have a fully funded endowed position at the University of Mississippi. We've got about a half a dozen that have begun the funding for them from various people and various groups, but we don't have one that's fully endowed. As of September the 30th, they had moved in 5 years from 112 to 774. And what they're doing is going after the cream of the crop of the faculties at all the universities. Now that's when it really starts coming home. And the schools in that area are scrambling to keep up with them. One of our best electrical engineers was the second highest paid faculty member on our campus. Now before, whenever anybody would try to get one of our stars, they would offer him $5,000 to $7,000 more. You'd say, go over there and interview in Houston and be sure that you're up at 8 o'clock and at 5 o'clock and see if you want to put up with that mess. And usually they'll come back saying, well, boy, that's not worth $5,000 to $7,000. SMU was trying to recruit one of our people right after I got here, and I said, well, go on over there, and they're going to take you down to that campus around between 10 and 3. And when they do, I said, don't buy it. You want to be on that North Central Expressway at 8 or at 5, because that's when you're going to be going into work, because you're not going to live in Highland Park. You know, don't believe you're going to live in Highland Park. A lot there is about $500,000. You're going to live way out on the other side of Plano, and you're going to drive down that expressway. Now, if that's worth $7,000 to you, well, then that's fine. This was a very junior faculty member. He came back and said, I'm staying, because he did that. Houston offered this faculty member $25,000 more than what we were paying him, and he was our second highest paid faculty member. But he's a star. And we simply couldn't match it, and he went. State has lost their director or their chair of the architectural school and some others for chunks along the same line. What's happening is, just like in professional football or basketball, when the demand's there, the price just shoots up. Since there are only so many of the best, and schools want them badly because that will help improve their whole image and it has implications for their area of the state, they are paying the top dollar to get them. And the challenge that it's going to occur for Ole Miss and State, and we're right in the middle of it, is that if we don't start doing some things to keep our stars, we're going to be denuded of those stars. Because in schools our size, in the departments no larger than most of our departments, 1 or 2 stars make the reputation of that whole department. And you simply have to have the stars to recruit the best students, to recruit the best junior faculty who want to come and work under those people. I got a call last month from a university several hundred miles from Oxford saying that we have started funding an endowed chair in this particular area. We think it'll be completely funded by the end of this fiscal year, which will be the end of next June. When it's funded, I'm offering you the courtesy of the information that we will offer it to Professor X at Ole Miss. Now, needless to say, I scrambled Professor X in and have been talking to him ever since. But that's the way that they do it. 774 of them at the University of Texas, and a number of them at other places. What the lesson of all this is If the richest institution on the face of the earth thinks that to maximize their potential, they need to get their alumni and friends involved in the institution, then what does that say for the rest of us? And that's why in my inauguration on August 25th, we kicked off the campaign for Ole Miss. The first private fundraising campaign in the 136-year history of the University of Mississippi. I guess we simply didn't want to rush into anything on it. But I tell you, it's none too soon. And what we are having as our primary goals are endowed faculty positions, endowed scholarships, endowed library purchases. Those three things make up the heart of a university, and that's where we're trying to get help the most, because that's what we need to ensure that the quality of the institution that has always been there stays there, because it's going to be harder and harder to make sure that's the case. Trinity University, a little school in San Antonio, is coming through this state offering $20,000 scholarships to any National Merit semifinalists in this state. They recruited about 6 of them out of the state this year who are now enrolled as freshmen at Trinity. I was up at Olive Branch talking to their National Merit, one of their National Merit semifinalists at the Rotary up there. They had 2 honor students of the month, and they were their 2 national semifinalists. And I said, who are we in, no, I asked the boy first, I said, who are we in competition with for you? And he said the schools I'd expect, Memphis State, Mississippi State, and Vanderbilt. Okay, we'll do that. I asked the young lady, who are we in competition with for you? And she said, well, you probably wouldn't know. And I said, I bet I would. And she grinned and said, well, it's Trinity University in San Antonio. She said, I spent last weekend down there. I said, did they offer you a $20,000 scholarship? And she grinned and said, yes, sir, they did. Now, that sounds like a lot of money, but their tuition for a year is about $8,000. And so if you take we offered every one of those National Merit semifinalists in this state a $5,000 scholarship, for which we don't have the money if they should all take it. But I believe in aggressively going after what you want, and then if you get it, you worry about how you're going to handle it. So we offered all 174 of them a scholarship. And anyway, I told her just to compute the ratio, and she'd find out that what we were offering her really was more money relative to the costs. But that's happening again and again and again. And if we're going to keep the best students in this state, we're simply going to have the kind of support that's required to do that. So the lesson of all this is, whether you're a supporter or a graduate of Mississippi State, Southern, Delta State, or whatever, you need to get involved in the support of that institution. We simply must provide the margin of excellence in this state in a way that will ensure that we will have the quality education here that truly will undergird the development of this state if we're going to participate in any real way in terms of producing components of the technological revolution rather than just consuming them, because we are going to use them. I can grant you that. We are going to use them. It's simply a matter of whether we're going to buy them all from other states or we're going to do some of the generation of them here in this state. And so I hope all of you Mississippi State people get in gear and do marvelous things. Let me know so I can show our alumni what you're doing. And in the same way, well, I'm sure that the state people will utilize the things that we're doing. But it is important to the development of the state that these comprehensive schools can furnish what these technology companies and those spin-offs from them are requiring to locate in the area. Thank you for letting me visit with you.
Dr. Turner, certainly it is a pleasure and an honor to have you with us today. We appreciate you coming and speaking to us and enlightening us about what's going on at our major universities. And Judd, we appreciate you bringing us this program. Like I said, you did it up big, and we appreciate it.
Judd's wife knows my assistant.
Okay, well, okay. I knew it was a string attached to something.
Now let me say this. He was at least smart enough to catch her.
Right, okay. Appreciate that.
Pleasure to have June Murphy with us today, William Morgan, Dr. Farmer, Benford Doler, Ed Quillen, Jesse Quillen, and Jeffrey Harris, our student. I believe that's all of our guests and visiting Rotarians. Is there any other announcements? Okay, if not, again, we certainly appreciate you coming, Dr. Turner. And if not, we'll stand and say our motto.
Service above self, he profits most who serves best. Good, enjoyed it so much.